Welcome to the third session of Searching for Salvation. Tonight we're going to talk about Jesus, about some of the things he likes and some of the things he may not like. Before we start, I want to make sure everybody knows this. I think I've said it, but I need to make sure I've said it. I am in no way expecting anybody or trying to get anybody to believe what I believe. No one's got a right to tell anyone how to live, be a Christian except Jesus Christ. We can help each other out, but that's my intention is quite simply to get people to read for themselves and study for themselves. And I hope that's what's happening. And tonight we're talking about Jesus. Isaiah said that he was a man of sorrows, and no one would be attracted to him by his looks. So, what can we learn from that? You know, the Christian life is the best life to live. The joy and the peace can't find anywhere else. And it's happy too, but there's also sadness for us because we look around ourselves and see all the people that are suffering, and we've done all we can do. So we're similar in that. We are supposed to be his disciples. So the other one about not being attractive, what does that say? The only thing I can come up with is, Jesus is God's son. So God could have made him look any way he wanted to. So the reason that he is not handsome has to be due to the fact that he and his father, Jesus and his father, did not want it to be a distraction. They wanted people to be listening to his message and not worrying about, oh man, he's a pretty nice looking guy. So that's the only thing I can think of. It's not important that we know the reason, but it's just there. Jesus, he walked everywhere. So he didn't have any transportation. He didn't own a horse. He didn't own a donkey. So that pretty well tells us how important transportation was to him. Now, for us, transportation is important. In the world we live in, it's an essential. And of course, he knows that we need those. So, but it's a matter of perspective. All through these, what we're going to be discussing, it's a matter of perspective. Where do you place them in your life? Jesus didn't have a home. He had no home. In Luke, it says, the foxes have holes, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. We know we need houses to house our family in. That's not what Jesus is talking about. It goes back to a matter of perspective. Clothing. Well, as far as we know, Jesus, at the most, had 2 changes of clothing. And we're not even sure about that. So, doesn't appear to be, clothing's not very important to him. As a matter of fact, in Matthew somewhere, he says, oh, I know what it is. From John, he's talking to John the Baptist, and he says, his disciples, and he says, after he was done talking to them and they left, he looked at the other crowd and he said, who'd you come to see? Somebody dressed in fine linen? Those that dress in fine linen are in palaces. Now, if you know the story of Jesus, the only time he was in a palace was when he was forced to go there by Pilate because he was in Herod's jurisdiction. And he never said one word to him. So it's a matter of perspective, because professional people, they have to have if you're in the public, you have to look well, and in order to people to take you seriously. So again, we have to keep everything though in perspective. Jesus never married. In fact, he tells us in one of his Gospels that it's probably better that we don't marry. He didn't say we can't marry. He said it would be better maybe if we don't marry because of your attention is split. But I will say this. I doubt very much if Jesus is worried about whether or not you find your soulmate. So, again, even in that respect, you have to have perspective. We know in Matthew it says, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things, the things we need, will be added to us. And that's what we've been talking about. But remember, it's the things we need, not the things we want. The whole point of this discussion is to say, well, yeah, Jesus lived this way, and we're to follow him, but we don't have to follow him exactly as he lived, because we're not required to. Because in John it says, the Spirit gives life, and the flesh counts for nothing. So Jesus is far more concerned about us developing our spirit and strengthening our spirit than he is to us paying attention to the flesh. Now, what does Jesus really care about? What is the most important things to him? Well, there are two scriptures I think that really can show that very well. And they're both in Matthew. And the first one, John Baptist is in prison, and he must know that he's been told by the Lord that his time here is almost done. And he's concerned about his disciples. So he goes to his disciples. He said, I want you to go to Jesus and ask him if he's the one that we're waiting for, or is there someone else? Now, I know this is for Jesus, or for John's disciples, because John knew who Jesus was. Early in John, the Gospel of John, he points out to Jesus as he walking along, he says, there, behold, the Lamb of God. So this wasn't for him, it was for his disciples. And so they go to him and they ask Jesus the question that John had told him to ask. And he said, you go back to John and you tell him that the blind receive sight, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the sick are healed, and very last he says, the poor have the gospel preached to them. So there's a lot in that. I mean, when these scriptures, when we're talking about them, every one of us has to make a decision on what they're about. Nothing was put in the New Testament just for, we need to make this a little, expound on this a little bit. No. All the scriptures are for us and are for our learning. And so we need to pay attention to these and look at them. Now, one other one I like to go and talk about is it's when Jesus is at the time of judgment. And he's up there and he says, he separates the sheep from the goat. He puts the sheep on his right side and the goats on the left side. And he looks at the sheep and he says, when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was hungry, you gave me some food. When I needed to be dressed, I received clothes. If I was a stranger, you took me in. If I was sick or in prison, you visited me. So they asked him, when did we do this to you? And Jesus told them that every time you did it to the least of one of mine, you did it to me. Then he turns to those on his left. And it's an exact opposite to that. You didn't visit me when I was sick. The same as, it's all negative. And they complain, well, when didn't we do that to you? And Jesus tells them, whenever you did not do it for one of the least of mine, you didn't do it to me. These things need to be paid attention to because they're not just mentioned here. What did Jesus do when he was on the earth? He didn't come to be served. He came to serve. He spent his entire life healing the sick, bringing the gospel to those that needed it, casting out devils, whatever the people needed. And Jesus was there. He provided it. Now we don't have to all be like this. We have lives. If you're married, you have a family, everything in perspective. But if these things are not in our life at all, then we need to reevaluate our life and see where maybe we might need to make some changes. There's one other thing that we need to be completely certain of. Jesus said in Matthew also, he tells them, he says, if you love your husband or wife more than me, you're not worthy of me. If you love your daughter or son more than me, you're not worthy of me. What does that mean? We need to make a decision on that. Well, quite simply, to me it means we have to struggle, and I'm sure it's going to be a lifelong struggle because we're having to deal with flesh. But it means to me that Jesus eventually has to be the most important person in our life. For us to be able to live the life that he wants us to live, we have to be able to do that. And the way to do that also is what we've been talking about. Getting in the Bible, listening to him, find out about how he did things. Look at Jesus' apostles. Now, some of them were married, some of them had houses, but none of them were rich. Not one. That should be a lesson for us. It'd be nice for me. I like to be that kind of person, as a Christian, not be worried about this or that. This has been a problem for me all my life. And there's no reason for it. There is no reason for anxiety. Church, if you're a member of the Church of Christ, everything's been paid for. All the promises belong to you. And I've seen the one he's talked about earlier about, where if we seek out his kingdom and these things be added to, that's happened a couple of times in my life. I've seen it. And if he'll do it for one of us, he'll do it for all of us. But the problem is, guys, we got to start working. We can't assume that the major part of our Christianity is going to church on Sunday. And of course, I'll be quick to add, nothing wrong with that. But if it's the only thing you really do, you need to question that about yourself in a self-examination. Because, quite frankly, from what I understand from the New Testament, it's the least part of the worship of Jesus Christ for your whole week. The least part. So, if it's the only part, then things are really out of bounds. Now, I realize I'm not there. It's hard to do this. In our society, extremely difficult. But we've got to make the effort. The Lord, he knows our heart. He can't be fooled. And he'll know whether or not we're struggling to put Jesus first or not. We'll know if we're trying to live a Christian life or not. He'll know whether or not we're reading and studying our Bible or not. We can't fool him at all, period. And we need to think about that in our entire life as we go through it. It's like we're on candid camera, because God is watching every single thing we do, good and bad. That's, when I think about some of the stuff I did, I'm just ashamed. I'm just so ashamed. And, I'm just so thankful that because of Jesus Christ's sacrifice, I can get forgiven of those things. It's a wonderful thing. But I guess I should say heal yourself. Physician, heal yourself. And that's really what I'm doing here. A lot of it is I'm studying in this and just helping me look at things I haven't looked at a lot in a long while. And so it's helping me. And I hope it's helping, them, the guys that are watching, the few. It doesn't matter who, how many. That's the great thing. Jesus will give the increase. I'll make this with help. After that, Jesus takes over, and I don't have to worry about it. Because he loves us all, and if there's anything to these sessions that he wants to get out, that it'll get out. Now, next week, we're going to talk about an individual Christian using self-examination to see how they're doing as a Christian. And we'll show, we're going to use the things that are in the New Testament to compare ourselves to. And it's something that, quite honestly, we're supposed to be doing on a regular basis. Because, the devil is pretty insidious. He can slip in unnoticed if we're not careful. Then the week after that, we're going to handle the churches, how they should be self-examining themselves. Because they certainly should be doing that, because it's not just them, it's the whole aggregate of people that go there. So there's an awesome responsibility for that. Well, I hope you've gotten something out of this lesson. And I'll hopefully see you the next time we do one. And you just have a good day. Thanks.